Alright, so I recorded for about an hour and a half last night, Sunday the 21st, with the intent for this to come out today, the 22nd, at about 6 in the morning. My general plan is for this to be kind of like a weekly Monday morning deal. We'll see as far as consistency and all that goes, because it is, in some ways, it's just kind of like a mental journal. So I can get my thoughts out without being entirely Twitter-brained. So, recapping what went on the last week, I'm probably going to cover it a bit more briskly here than I would have then, because, well, I don't want to spend another hour and a half talking about all the things I already talked about. So we're going to keep our focus as well as we can. Things I wanted to get out there. I think the big relevant thing right now is the Charlie Kirk Memorial. Big showing, big state funeral for a podcaster, millions of dollars paid in taxpayer money. Completely necessary endeavor, I guess, if that's your thing. I think it's pretty dumb that they did this, and I think it's also it's honestly pretty disrespectful to the guy himself. I don't have positive opinions of Charlie Kirk. I've known about Charlie Kirk for a long time, and I've never had a positive opinion of the guy. But, this whole thing is not, it's not really a funeral. It's more of a political rally. It's people have made the Reichstag comparison, and it seems like that's what they're going for. Either, if you want to be conspiratorial, this was their plan. If you don't want to be conspiratorial, then, well, they probably either saw this as an opportunity, or they were like, oh my god, Charlie Kirk is dead, and then when people started talking about it as if it was the Reichstag thing, they were like, oh, we could use that. But I don't know. His wife forgave the shooter. Now that we've found there's no credible link between him and the left, which is what everybody on the left and anybody with a brain on the right could see, that this guy doesn't seem to be connected to the left. And I would even go as far as to say, if the guy they have is the guy that did it, I would venture to say he's probably a groyper. There's people in his friend group who have referred to him as that. People who they say are part of his friend group. But I don't know. I think he's not a kid. He's an adult. He's in his 20s. But I think he's at an age where I think he can still be kind of lost in the sauce of all the online shit, which is why, he used memes on his bullets. But it's beside the point. Stephen Miller used this to do a Goebbels speech, basically, using a lot of the same terminology, talking about, he literally, talked about bloodlines, which is, great, awesome. Donald Trump, we'll circle back to this in a little bit. Donald Trump said he has a solution to autism, which he's going to be announcing today. I was going to wait for that announcement, but I'm pretty confident it's going to be the Tylenol during pregnancy as a cause of autism. I've seen a lot of people who think vaccines are the cause who are coming out against this, especially women who have been pregnant before and know that Tylenol is pretty much the only way to deal with pregnancy pain. We'll see if that's the entire story or if there will be more to it. So what else? He said Charlie didn't wish the worst on his enemies, which is, a lie. Charlie Kirk called for the death penalty for Joe Biden for what we're not really sure, I guess, being a Democrat. Donald Trump said he hates his enemies. He does not wish the best for them. Fine, whatever. If you look at how Donald Trump has been throughout this election cycle and the last 8 months, a little over 8 months now, since he took the presidency, it's been very clear that he's pretty much entirely fueled by vengeance and spite right now. I think this is what makes, I kind of spoke about this, and I'm going to try to speak about it a little more briefly. The thing that makes Donald Trump so scary now is that he doesn't seem to have any sort of self-preservation. I mean, he does, because he's lying about the Epstein files. He ran on releasing them, and now he's saying they're entirely a hoax, but he doesn't seem to have any real self-preservation. He seems entirely motivated by hedonistic revenge. Whereas before, I think he did try to do some things, but he was always trying to play to his base, and I don't think he's doing that now. He's come out and said smart people don't like me. And he's attacking reporters, which, those in his base who do care about the Constitution will be upset about how he's attacking reporters and attacking late night hosts and comedians and all that. All this to say, it's always a little surprising when he comes out and says something publicly. It's like, people shouldn't be talking like this in elected positions, but that's par for the course, so the shock wears off pretty quickly. But yeah, we'll loop back on that in a minute. Turning Point USA is saying that Charlie Kirk, when he was shot, there was no exit wound on the bullet. Candace Owens, who's had shoddy sources in the past, is saying she's seen the missing camera footage. After Charlie was shot, we've seen some phone videos of this guy in sunglasses in a gray t-shirt. I'm not sure exactly what his role is, but I think it's been said he works for Turning Point in some way or another, whether he was a security contractor or if he was like a tech person. I don't know, and I can't speak to that, but there is video of this guy coming and getting the camera that was closest to Charlie, the one that would take the close-up shots, that he gets for his videos where he's doing his, like, epic owns or whatever he does. This guy took this camera. People have wondered, what does this camera show? Is it a different angle? We're doing conspiracy, and there's a lot to conspiracy theorize about in this whole thing, but Candace Owens says she's seen the footage from this camera, and she has corroborated the story, said there's no exit wound. I don't know that Candace has seen that footage, but I do know that Erica Kirk followed Candace recently on Instagram, and if what Candace was saying was truly against what she thought and was like causing them issues, I think she wouldn't have done it. So I think Erica Kirk is maybe looking at this critically as well, but I don't know, we'll see. I'm not inclined to publicly draw conclusions. I have private thoughts about what I think is going on about the whole thing, but I would like more information to come out before I really take a stance about it. Let's see. Let's move on from Charlie Kirk, because I'm sure there will be more to say as they continue to parade his corpse around to get people angry. So yeah, Donald Trump called somebody obnoxious and refused to answer their questions about sending the National Guard into Memphis. I guess I'll say one more thing about the memorial is that Donald Trump mentioned people are cheering for the soldiers in Memphis, which is interesting because National Guard has not been deployed. I'm kind of, I think he will still make good on the promises to send National Guard into states, but I think he's going to target red states who will let him in. I think the blue states, like Illinois, are going to give him trouble. I'm not convinced that the National Guard will go into Chicago. I think he's going to pick the ones that are easy. So Tennessee, Memphis is a blue city, but the red state, I find it likely that they will allow them in. St. Louis, I think, is going to be a target because we have a Republican governor who is doing what Trump wants him to do. I think, I don't know. That's something that should be met with a lot of backlash. And hopefully the people in these cities, just because the state has allowed it to happen, don't let it continue. I would like to see Americans do what the people of France are doing and actually have a sustained protest rather than do one day of no kings and then stop, I think no kings should be using their platform to try and push a more substantial protest than one day so they can wait it out. But what else? I think everything that can be said about Jimmy Kimmel has been said. I think a lot of these sources should keep in mind that if you do not take his demands seriously, he can do nothing to force it. And what I mean by that is I believe the New York Times, because the New York Post, I believe, is more favorable to Trump, but I could be wrong. A major New York publication, Donald Trump sued them in the state of Florida for $15 billion, and it was thrown out by the judge. So he is flexing that he is the biggest boy. That's all he really cares about, is that he's the biggest boy and he gets to throw his biggest boy tantrums. I think it should be kept in mind that nothing he's doing is legal, so most judges will not allow it to happen. The only thing that would allow it to happen is if he were to do another January 6th, rile up his supporters. And I think if he does, he knows he cannot do that because he will be removed from office if that happens. So I would challenge reporters who are able to stand in front of him and are able to say or are able to ask these questions should push the issues and not let him bully you into being quiet. I know they're saying they're going to take people's press credentials if they don't report the correct information. I'd say, what do you have to lose? Because you're going to lose them anyway if he gets his way. I would also say the press owes it to each other to support each other. So if he is talking down a question that somebody has that you think should be answered, I think you should press the issue on that question and forego your question to make sure that answers come out. I think the press needs to be supporting each other in that regard. I think it's pretty sad and pretty cowardly that we're getting, reporters are just allowing him to move on from a question without pushing the issue. I think you should force him to answer, and if he goes, well, we're done, we're going to walk out, and he doesn't answer your question, I think that should be seen, that should be told, and if he takes your press credentials, you are going to lose them anyway. He's going to come for them if he can, so don't allow this shit. Tell your networks, like, he cannot force you to do this. I think the FCC is probably going to be forced to dial back what it's doing because of how much money ABC is losing off of the Jimmy Kimmel situation. I think it's up to like $5-6 billion at this point. And the acquisition of ABC, I think, was $6 billion. So, Look at where the money's going and think of whether Walt Disney is going to let that stand. I can't say much about Kash Patel other than he's talking around every single question. He's spineless, and I think he will clearly be forced to resign. If nobody else is forced to resign in this entire administration, Kash Patel will be the one. What else do we got? Israel, 4 U.S. citizens have been killed in Lebanon by Israel. 3 of those were children. I would just say, imagine if the shoe was on the other foot, and imagine if Lebanon bombed Israel and 4 U.S. citizens were killed, and think of the action that we would take. And if you're saying, what kind of action would we take? I would say, well, only 2,000 of us were killed in 9/11, and we killed millions in response. So keep an eye on it, because they're showing you where their allegiances lie, and it's not to American citizens. What else do we have? I talked about the protests in France. I would like to see that from America. I would like to see if we're going to have these protests. Granted, it's a show of how many people are willing to do it for a day. That's where I think the issue with them lies. It's not that these are bad things to do. But if we can only show them that nationwide we are willing to have this for a day, and not we are willing to do this, then they will wait out the day. Because other than LA, and I think maybe one other city, No King's protests were not met with much police or guard interference. And the reason for that is, well, they only had to wait them out for a day. So the more you push the issue, the more they're going to have to decide if they want that smoke, I guess. Let's see, before I cut this out, let's see if the announcement has been made. BBC News is saying the announcement has to do with Tylenol. Yeah. I think people will take this seriously, which is unfortunate because I think RFK Jr., being who he is, you would expect people to be skeptical of the things that he says because he was not just a drug addict, but a drug dealer. And the way that, it shows how much people are playing team sports. It's like, could you imagine the flip of this? Okay, let's say the next Democrat puts Hunter Biden in JFK's spot, it would explode everything. It would. People would be in a fucking fit. And for good reason. He doesn't have the credentials to do this job. He's not a doctor. He's not a health official. Yeah, I can say a lot about the Tylenol thing. It's been recommended since after we really discovered autism, and we knew something was going on, but we didn't know what it was and how to diagnose it. It preceded Tylenol by about 40 years, 45 years, maybe 35 years. I think it was 1919 was the discovery of autism. 1954 is when Tylenol began being recommended during pregnancy as the safe painkiller option. Whatever. People who are smart will continue to get their vaccines and Tylenol, and the people who are not will have more unbearable pregnancies and will die of measles or Black Death, and they will have earned that. And, encourage them, give them good information, And if they still do not listen, then they make their bed on that regard. You know, if they get sick, they get sick. Anyway, let's see. A bunch of American investors are buying TikTok. Fox News is apparently one of the investor groups. TikTok has been suppressing pro-Palestine content for some time. So, you know, if you get your information from TikTok, keep in mind that it was already clearly biased, and the bias is probably going to swing in the other direction now, is what I would imagine. You know, it was biased toward not necessarily leftist stuff, but it's been biased toward liberal and not even quote unquote woke or politically correct, but sanitized speech. You know, the fact that unalive and grape and sewer slide and all these things have become part of casual conversations is pretty bad. And I think that's part of what's paved the way for how they're controlling speech now. Oh well. I don't have too much more to say about that. I don't use TikTok. I use Twitter more than I would like, but I try to get the information from Twitter and then verify it as best I can from other sources. Either way. Let's look at my notes here, see if we covered anything else. We covered the Charlie Kirk memorial. We covered Charlie Kirk. We covered Trump and his controlling of speech. Whether or not that's something that's going to continue. We've covered some of Israel. Oh yeah, one more thing about Israel. Bibi Netanyahu says the state of Palestine will not be established. Lots of places are recognizing Palestine as a state. The maps that they're showing are a limited Palestine, not the original Palestine, which is it in its entirety. I don't know. The whole Israel-Palestine situation makes me mad, and I think when I have other people on here, that's going to come out in a more substantial way. Suffice it to say here that it is not enough to recognize the state if you will do nothing to protect it, and so I would like to see places like Brazil, who are I believe it's Brazil, filed a motion to intervene, is what the United Nations call it. I would like to see more places file that and act on it. Anyway, that's all the news stories, and hopefully I can have other people on here and we can talk about this in a more substantial way. I cut this in half compared to the hour that I spent on it yesterday. I had less to say because I didn't want to repeat myself. And I probably said less poignant things because I was running through it, but it's okay. I will talk more at length about things and how I feel about them in the future. So I'm going to leave you with what do we have to look forward to and be thankful for. All of these are kind of with a grain of salt. Some Republicans, not just the Democrats, but some Republicans as well, are standing up to Trump. Ted Cruz, Tulsi Gabbard, even Ben Shapiro have talked about how this controlling of speech is unconstitutional. Tulsi Gabbard did it at the Charlie Kirk memorial, which I think is as much as I dislike her, it's a pretty baller move. I don't like her. I don't consider her an ally in any way, but I am happy to see more of these people doing this. All 218 signatures necessary to release the Epstein files have been acquired. Reason I say grain of salt for that is, well, what are you going to do if he says no? Genuinely, what are we going to do if he says no? If the answer is remove him from office, great. If the answer is just court orders, I mean, he defies things constantly. So there needs to be some kind of plan in place if these files are not released by the people who have voted to release them or signed the petition to release them or not. Last thing, a ICE facility in Broadview, which I believe is a suburb of Chicago. It's somewhere in Chicago or somewhere nearby. It's in Illinois, regardless. This ICE facility had protesters outside for days. People who are running for office were there. They were getting thrown around by ICE agents, but because of the protests, they are apparently relocating everybody they've detained there to a more humane facility, which is a win, but it's not a full win. Obviously, it would be better if this facility and all the relevant facilities were shut down. But I think that shows that meeting this stuff with an active resistance isn't futile. I think more people should consider doing that in other states. I'm sure it's happening, but this is the one that's come to me frequently. I think because a lot of where I'm looking at LA, I'm looking at New York, and I'm looking kind of in the central time zone, Midwest region, because that's going to be extremely relevant to me. I'm trying to keep everyone in mind, but I consolidate a lot of my local focus here on the Midwest because that's where I'm going to be the most relevant. So yeah, I hope to see that in more places, and I hope to see more progress be made there. Something to be happy about, something to look forward to. Grain of salt is, what does it mean that they're being put at a different facility? Is it actually going to be better, or is it just somewhere else so they're harder to find and organize at? That's my concerns. Song for this week, I think I had this last night, and I'm going to stick to it. It's not one of my favorites. It's not off my favorite album, but it is by my favorite band, Rise Against. Check out Morning in America. Morning spelled with a U and America spelled with a K instead of the C. Check out that song. I think it's pretty relevant in both how the right is presenting themselves and how it kind of feels to be here right now. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. Thanks for tuning in. Just going to put it out here and let it sit. So yeah, thanks for coming. And I think next time I will have other people on to speak to, so I'm not just rambling through all the events.